Warning, this episode contains foul language, potentially disturbing stories, and at least 3 jerks.
Listening to Keep It Weird, the podcast for all things strange, unusual, paranormal, supernatural, creepy, sticky, gross, scary, and everything in between. And we are the luckiest girls alive because each week we get to sit down with a friend and chat about something weird. This week is part 2 of our sports episode, and I am joined once again by my lovely co-host Lauren and our hilarious guest, actor, writer, and comedian CARL TART, who you have seen on Drunk History, Transparent, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place, and you can also catch him on Comedy Bang Bang, several other podcasts like Doughboys and Good Christian Fun, his own podcast, The Flagrant Ones, on Patreon, and several days a week performing at the UCB Theater in Hollywood, California. And grab yourself a bite to eat at Birds while you're at it. It's absolutely delicious. Can we go there again soon?
Birds?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fuck yeah. Oh, surprise, listeners.
Hi.
My special guest for the first part of this episode is your favorite boy, but you can't have him because he's mine, Mr. Joe Oakes.
Hello.
Hi, Joey.
Hi.
Today is part 2 of our sports episode. I'm going to be bringing our listeners a bunch of paranormal and supernatural sports stories, which is absolutely wild. I can't believe they exist. But I wanted you to join me today because you found a sports story that was also wild, and I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers. So I'm committing somewhat of a cardinal sin here. I'll explain that in a minute. But this is normally a franchise and an organization that I don't typically pay too much good attention to.
Yes.
I'm a bit of a sports nut, as I'm sure you listeners have gathered with my 751,000 sports analogies I've used to talk about science. So if I talk about sports when the topic is science, you can only imagine how excited I am to talk about sports. So the story that I have for you, children today, comes from a simpler time. It's the early spring, late winter of 1973.
Ooh, the 70s were
Close
wild.
your eyes. Take yourself back there.
What's
all right?
it smell like?
Crocodile Rock and Superstition by Elton John and Stevie Wonder are topping the charts. It smells like mostly body odor, vomit, and urine.
Okay. And hot dogs if you're at the ball
if
field.
you've ever smelled someone freebase cocaine, it also smells like that. So, 1973, the Vietnam War is finally winding down. A gallon of gasoline costs 39 cents.
Lovely.
And Tricky Dick Nixon is embroiled in the scandal that will prematurely end his presidency. But in the Bronx...
Was that Watergate?
Mm-hmm. In the Bronx, New York, outside the house that Ruth built, an equally shocking scandal is breaking. And it involves the city's beloved and iconic New York Yankees.
Oh, shit.
Also known as the bane of my existence.
Yeah, Joey's a Red Sox fan. I don't know if you guys know that. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, but hey, this story transcends fandom. So the reason that this scandal is brewing around the Yankees that there's been a big trade, right? But this is no ordinary trade. Ashley
Not a
Cassidy.
sportsy trade?
This is not a matter of one baseball player being traded for another. This isn't a matter of a baseball player being sold for money. This isn't a matter of a baseball player really even being traded at all. It is a story of one baseball player trading in his wife and children for his teammates' wife and children.
That's insane.
This is the story of Fritz Peterson and
insane.
Mike Kekich. Yeah.
They swapped lives?
Yeah. Well,
like
I'm
Freaky
there.
Friday?
I'll feed you. Yeah,
Okay.
It's coming. Yeah, exactly like Freaky Friday. They woke up one day like a real heaven can wait scenario with Warren Beatty.
In
Yeah.
each other's bodies.
So again, 1973, and the Yankees are finding themselves at a bit of a crossroads. So it's been the better part of a decade since this iconic franchise has been at the top of baseball. So there have been periods of time, the late 20s through the 30s. That's, the quote unquote murderers row Yankees. It's Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig.
Oh,
it's,
shit.
It's
I know those names.
Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
And then that generation kind of bled into Joe DiMaggio.
I know that name too.
You certainly do. And then,
Those are
there's
famous
guys, Yogi Berra, Joe Pepitone, there's all of these iconic players. Then that era starts to bleed into Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. And it's like, for about 40 years, the Yankees never really die off.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they don't win the World Series, but they're right there for like 4 decades because they've just got all the best players in the game. Yeah.
But also, like, why did the Yankees always win?
Oh, this is your Catch Me If You Can reference? Because
Yeah.
everybody's looking at the pinstripes. Yeah, it's funny. Tom Hanks actually has a pretty perfect answer. Leo's like, why do the Yankees win? He's like, because they got fucking Joe DiMaggio. That's why they always win. Yeah, because they had the best players. That's why they always won. But in 1973, the Yankees are finding themselves, they're falling back. The Oakland A's have now risen up, and the A's are the team to beat in baseball right now. And we're not quite in Reggie Jackson, Mr. October Yankees territory, and Mickey Mantle has already ridden off into the sunset. So this is a real downtime for the New York Yankees. And
might as well zhuzh it up with a scandal.
Well, that's important to note because George Steinbrenner, 1973, is the year that George Steinbrenner buys the team. Steinbrenner went on to own the Yankees for 37 years until his death. His son, Hank, is now the owner of the team. But at the time, billionaire shipping magnate George Steinbrenner bought the franchise for $10 million.
That's chump change.
So for context's sake, just this past offseason, the Yankees signed a pitcher named Garrett Cole.
Uh-huh.
And this year, he's going to make $36 million. And he's going to make $36 million for the 8 years after that, too. So when you think George Steinbrenner paid $10 million for the Yankees, that's pretty insane. So back to the subject at hand. So these two pitchers, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich, have slightly different backgrounds. So Peterson's the older of the two. He's 31 years old. He's enjoyed a successful, if slightly unheralded, career to this point. He's a pitcher. He's had a really good ERA for every one of his 7 years. ERA, for those of you listening
saw my
at
face.
home. Yep. That's your earned run average. That's pretty much over time. The nerds have started to take over baseball, but for a long period of time, it's pretty much the best way to properly adjudicate how well a pitcher is doing. It's the average amount of runs they allow per 9 innings.
Okay.
So that's a good barometer to...
So you want a low number.
Exactly. And this guy's had a nice low ERA for the 7 years of his career. In 1970, just a couple years prior, he won 20 games, which is a real big benchmark for pitchers. They can say for the rest of their lives, not only did I make it to the major leagues, but I was a pitcher and I was a 20-game winner. He was nominated to the All-Star game for that year. So even though he's not quite a star player, he's a guy that the Yankees are really counting on this upcoming season. Yeah, him and Mel Stottlemyre are kind of the anchor of the Yankee staff. Off the field, he's known as a bit of a joker. He's the guy who would put talcum powder inside a player's hairdryer. So they go to turn the hairdryer on to blow dry their hair, and they just blast talcum powder all over their face and all over their hair.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, his most famous prank was that he had a bunch of fake newspapers printed up with a headline saying that the Yankees plane had crashed and that the only surviving player was Fritz Peterson.
Oh my God.
That he was the only survivor of the plane crash. So he's a funny guy,
right?
Kekich, on the other hand, is
not funny at all.
He's as serious as a heart attack. No, he's also a pitcher. He's several years younger. He's 27 years old, and he's a little bit of a contrast. He's tall, he's tan, he's a laid-back California guy. He's not like straight-laced buzz cut, but he's definitely like a kind of hang back, march to the beat of his own drum kind of guy. He's 27. He has yet to fully live up to his billing as an amateur player. Some scouts said he was the second coming of Sandy Koufax, who's, this otherworldly Hall of Fame all-time great pitcher. He'd been an okay pitcher, but he'd never, to that point, really...
He didn't knock anybody's socks off.
Yeah.
He didn't knock anybody's nicks off.
He hadn't really lived up to his potential, but the previous season he had his best year ever. So coming into the 73 season, there's some optimism brewing, especially around their pitching staff with Mel Stottlemyre, Fritz Peterson, Mike Kekich. Like, hey, we might be able to make some moves in the division. We got some good pitchers this year. So this is all, spring training is getting underway. And on March 5th, 1973, so that's less than a month before the new season begins, the two players themselves hold a small press conference to address this rumor that's beginning to circulate and run wild and is beginning to cause a little bit of unrest, and it's a little bit of a distraction in the locker room. It's this story of the two not swapping wives, as people are kind of grumbling, like, oh yeah, they swapped out wives. They haven't swapped wives. They've swapped lives. They're swapping the children that they live with as well.
That's insane.
Yeah. So the two players had known each other for 4 years already, since Kekich had joined the Yankees in 1969. And they were roommates on the road ever since. And that's a real bonding thing for athletes, because, these are grown men. And, even though back then they weren't making nearly as much money as these guys make today. I mean, a lot of these guys had off-season jobs still in the early 70s. But even though they're grown men playing a child's game, they're grown men. They've got wives. They've got kids. And when they go on the road, they've got another grown man in their hotel
who's
room
missing their
every
wives
night.
and their kids.
Yeah. So your direct roommate as a professional athlete on the road, there's a lot that comes along with that. Close friendships really develop with that. And the same was true of these guys. They had developed a really close friendship. Not only had they become friends, but their wives and families had become friends as well. Both couples had 2 children, and they were all about the same age. So it was like perfect. They would go on vacations together. They were close.
Oh, God, this is weird.
No, moreover, this is just something that kind of caught my eye. All 4 of these adults had some form of higher education beyond high school. So for pro ball players, let alone people in 1973, this was something. This was something that was a little bit less common back then than it is now, especially in the arena of pro sports. These are all people who have had a little bit of a taste of higher education. That's not necessarily a precursor to greater intelligence, but oftentimes it does mean that, loftier or more elevated subject material can be discussed between these couples. So it's just further cementing the bond between these couples. So by the summer of 1972, the 4-way friendship had begun to blossom into something more. Remember, it's the 70s.
It is the 70s.
It's the early 70s,
popular.
right? So if there were ever a time,
pill parties,
this is it. Key parties,
swinging.
Let's all drop our keys off in the fishbowl, and I'll take 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 yellow, and see where I wind up and with
happens.
whom. So both together and independently from one another, everybody involved in this 4-way tryst kind of becomes arriving at the conclusion that perhaps they're married to the wrong person. So as quoted in a New York Magazine article from that time, Kekich himself said, "By all American standards, I had a good marriage, but I wanted a great marriage. I was idealistic, I guess." End quote. So by July of 1972, a beat writer at the time for the Yankees named Maury Allen overhears Peterson and the Peterson and Kekich families discussing a potential swap. Back then, it wasn't unusual for ball players to spend a lot of time with reporters. They're traveling on the same planes, they're staying in the same hotels, and back then they also made approximately the same amount of money. So there wasn't really a divide of any kind between these people. Whereas today, it's definitely like an us versus them kind of thing. So Maury Allen had noticed that something in particular was amiss with Marilyn Peterson. Now, Fritz Peterson's wife, Marilyn, typically would wear a blonde wig because that's the way that her husband, Fritz, liked her to look.
What the fuck?
Yeah, all right. So not only are we getting into some freaky stuff, but also this is also a time and a place where it's like, hey, put on the blonde wig. That's how I like you to look. Imagine if I came home one day and we had dinner plans that night and I was like, hey, change everything about your appearance because tonight I want to go out with a blonde. You'd be like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Hold on a second. And then you'd close the door and then you'd open it like 45 minutes later and you'd have a duffel bag that had a bunch of my shit packed in it. And you'd be like, here you go. The blonde wig is in there. Go put it on whatever whore you want to go put this on. It's been real. But, you know, again, 1973. You can do these kinds of things. So on this particular night, Marilyn Peterson arrives with her natural hair color, right?
Oh,
Maury
shit.
Allen remembers thinking to himself that she looked sweeter and just more natural and happier and more relaxed than he'd ever seen her before. So Marilyn had spoken with Maury Allen's wife weeks prior, and she had been kind of poking around a little bit. She'd been asking him how many times she and Maury had sex, how many times she thought it was normal for a couple to have sex. And the implication here was that her husband Fritz was somewhat of a reluctant partner in the bedroom, at least as far as his wife was concerned.
Right.
So Suzanne Kekich, however, seemed to be kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. She was like publicly letting it be known that she had eyes for Fritz. It seemed when they would go out that she was like directly, blatantly competing with Marilyn for her husband Fritz's attention.
Now, were they friends, the ladies?
Yes.
Okay, because that seems like what?
Right. It's you can come at this from any number of angles, and I don't know if any of them are going to provide you with clarity here. But it definitely seemed a little bit more out in the open. It was, I think, a little bit more of a testament to each of the two's personalities. Suzanne was known as being a little aggressive. It wasn't too difficult to discern her intentions from moment to moment. She's described as being tall, athletic-looking, and very type A personality. So by the end of that July evening, the two couples eventually parted ways, but they had parted ways with one another's spouse. They had the trade had gone through, the phone call to the commissioner's office had been made, the league had signed off on the trade, and the swap had been made. So by the fall of 72, the couples had fully swapped lives, moving in with one another's spouse. Fritz Peterson had moved in with Suzanne and her children. Mike Kekich had moved in with Marilyn and her children. So the arrangement was that the kids were going to stay with their moms. That was the thing that they were going to try to do to root this life swap in some sort of normalcy for the kids. Another thing that they tried to do, Fritz Peterson himself said that in an effort to make his kids feel a little bit less strange about the whole thing. I mean, good luck with that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. He says that he went out of his way to build up Mike in his kids' eyes.
Oh, okay.
Talking about he's faster than I am, he's stronger than I am, the kinds of things that
you're
little kids are
you're
impressed
winning.
with. Listen, Uncle Mike, he's great. You're gonna love him. He's so fast. He's faster than me. He throws a ball harder than I do. He's crazy. Just wait until you get to play with him. He's so much fun. Just trying to make this at least a little more normal for your soon-to-be fucked-up kids. But by the spring training of 1973, the seeds of discontent had already been sown, unfortunately. So Fritz and Suzanne are quite happy. But Mike and Marilyn aren't doing terribly well.
Oh.
So the love and attraction between them was undeniable and had continued. But Mike Kekich, in his own words, said that they were, quote, born under the same sign. We regularly butted heads and were getting under one another's skin. So simply put, they were too similar. Joyce Brothers, Dr. Joyce Brothers, famed TV love guru and psychoanalyst of the time, she even weighed in on the subject of these four people at the time and had predicted that the four-way swap wouldn't work out for everybody involved because she said they never do. So the four of them had initially agreed that if any of the four of them were unhappy, the entire deal was off. And they had actually tried going back to their original spouses in immediate light of this negative development of Mike and Marilyn not doing quite so well. But Fritz and Suzanne, after attempting to split up and get back together, they claimed that they were just too much in love to be apart from one another, and they reunited. But with Kekich and Marilyn unable to really make things work out, Marilyn and her and Fritz's children moved to Illinois to be closer to her parents. So Fritz and Suzanne are together with Suzanne's kids. Marilyn moves to Illinois with her kids, which means that Mike is totally the odd man out. He is now spouseless, womanless, childless, totally out on his own.
That's
which
sad.
Is super, super depressing. So according to reports, it gets more depressing. After it became official that he and Marilyn weren't going to be able to work things out, there was a lot of worry with what a sticky situation this was turning into for the Yankees.
Yeah.
That he was going to get traded. Now, it's important, I think, at this time to note that well into the 21st century, George Steinbrenner maintained this kind of like, there's like the Yankee way.
Mm-hmm.
And the Yankee way is probably best characterized as being clean cut. The list of free-spirited major league ball players with their crazy long or curly hair and big sideburns, whatever, just dirty, grody looking, hillbilly looking dudes, whatever you were, when you joined the New York Yankees, you got a haircut, you shaved your beard, like it was like you're going to be the 1960s version, early 1960s version, like Mad Men, of like what a man should look like. This is how you're going to represent the New York Yankees. It's important to bring this up because, George Steinbrenner, a big thing, like I said, that he carried into the 21st century was appearances, marketing, PR. When you play for the Yankees, that means something. You're not just another ball player. This is the house that Ruth built. That's where Joe DiMaggio played. That's where Mickey Mantle played. There's a standard to uphold here, even though DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle were like two of the biggest womanizers who ever lived. This was before our 24-hour news cycle, so people didn't know that back then.
And before Me Too. Go on.
Yeah, and before the Me Too movement. So with all of this going on, Kekich can kind of see the writing on the wall, especially now that he's the odd man out of this four-way tryst. So he went to the team's front office and begged them to not trade him. Or if they did trade him, just please make sure you trade Fritz to the same place, because being on the same team as Fritz was, to quote him, the only way I can be sure of being able to see my daughters.
Oh, Jesus.
Because they live with his teammate Fritz now.
Wow.
Yeah, so as heartbreaking as that is, I can't think of that statement from Mike in stark contrast to the fact that Fritz, upon hearing of his ex-wife's split from Kekich, knowingly chose his new spouse and her children over his own kids. I mean, his kids, it was like, hey, listen, you can stay with Suzanne if you're just so in love. This is the woman for you, but it's not working out for Mike and I need help with the kids, so I'm moving back to Illinois. And Fritz was like, go for it.
Bye.
Go ahead, move to Illinois, take my kids. I mean, the only comment that I could find from Fritz, like, on the matter was he offered up, once upon a time, I have no regrets, only for my kids. It's hard to think of them with no father. Which, like, even the phrasing of that is kind of weird, because it makes it sound like he feels bad that his kids don't have a dad. But
it's not his responsibility.
Yeah, but it's like, but hey, hey, I made my choice. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Also, like, their dad, quote unquote, dad walked away from them. Right. And it's not me. It's Mike.
So interesting there. So
yeah.
Predictably, the 1973 baseball season gets off on a bit of a rocky start for the New York Yankees. There's a little bit of a media circus surrounding the team at this point. Neither pitcher are pitching. Neither pitcher is performing particularly well, but Mike Kekich especially. He's off to a really rocky start. So the first 14 innings he's pitched in the season, he gives up 15 runs and walks 14 batters.
No.
So he's given up more than a run every inning he goes out there. He's walking a guy every inning he goes out there. It's just very clear, pitching being such a cerebral exercise.
Yeah.
I was a pitcher once upon a time, and even as like a kid pitching, you're not throwing, you're pitching.
Yeah.
There's the whole like the melding of the mind and body that goes into pitching. Pitching is like the sports equivalent of yoga, where it's like if your body and your brain aren't perfectly synced up, the results aren't going to be what you want them to be.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so unsurprisingly, the guy who winds up sitting on his thumb in this whole 4-way life swap is the guy who's having the worst go of it. So 4 games into the season, Mike Kekich gets traded. He gets traded to the Cleveland Indians. But it was also kind of the beginning of the end of Fritz Peterson's career too. So to this season, at this point, Peterson produced the worst ERA and the worst record of his career to this point in 1973. And the following year, he too got traded to Cleveland. But Mike Kekich had played so badly for the Indians after getting traded there that the next year he was out of Major League Baseball altogether and was pitching in Japan at this point in time.
Jeez. Here's another thing, though. You're out of Major League altogether. If your kids are that important to you, get a job in the city in which they live. You don't need to be a pitcher.
Sure.
You're going to move all the way to Japan to be a pitcher?
Sure.
It just seems like 4 very selfish people.
Yeah, it does.
Go on.
Yeah, it really does. So Kekich flames out of baseball pretty quickly. And then after that, the self-proclaimed soul searcher that Mike Kekich was, he bounced around quite a bit. He went to medical school in Mexico, but didn't finish.
Well,
he moved to New Mexico for a period of time and worked in real estate, but he stopped doing that as well. But ever since that fateful life swap, he made a deliberate effort to live outside the spotlight. In fact, Ben and Casey Affleck, along with Matt Damon, have for some years now been working on plans to option the story into a film.
Oh.
Reportedly, a script has been in the works for quite some time, written by the three. But apparently, Mike Kekich himself was so panic-stricken at the news that this script was being worked on and they were trying to obtain the rights that he moved away from where he was living and legally changed his name.
Oh, shit. So we don't even know where he is.
Yeah, this is something that has been like kind of haunting this poor guy ever since.
Sounded fun at the time.
Yeah, it was the 70s. So as far as his musings on the swap, the best quote that I could find was, "Love is the strongest emotion I've ever felt in my life. I'm one of the biggest soul searchers around. I don't give a damn what people say, but Marilyn does. I have a little heartache that I can't be with my girls, and I'm sad that Marilyn and I can't work things out. I can't tell you how perfect it would have been if it worked."
That's sweet and sad.
Yeah. So Peterson and Suzanne Kekich, on the other hand, have been happily married ever since 1974.
Oh, well, at least there's that.
They're married to this day. According to Peterson, they are still crazy in love. He retired from baseball in 1976, and he also kind of bounced around a little bit. He worked in insurance for a while. He worked as a blackjack dealer. He was a color and play-by-play announcer for hockey, and he's now an author of 2 books. He's also a born-again evangelical Christian at this point, which is also like really not surprising because the list of people who become born again, and I say this with no judgment. I say this like, listen, everybody's got to do what they've got to do at any moment's notice whenever they feel like they need to ground themselves in their life. But suffice to say, I'm not super surprised that a professional ball player from the early 70s who traded out his wife and children for somebody else's wife and children and also probably had a good, drinking and extracurricular recreational drug habit going at the time. I'm not surprised to find out that he's now a born-again Christian because it just kind of works out that way a lot of the time. But the books that he's written are unusual. The way that they are very unusual. I kind of really struggle to make heads or tails of them myself because the main crux of both of these books is where he basically just offers up his musings and his take on the status of his former teammates' souls as they pertain to the afterlife and where he thinks they're going. Yeah.
I gotta give me a copy of this.
It's insane. As in, like, in this dude's opinion, this fucking guy, this wife-swapping, children-packing, fucking pro ball player from the 70s feels like he's in a position now to offer this shit up.
He's got an in with God.
Yeah,
he knows.
because some pastor somewhere splashed a little bit of water on his face, so now he's in a position to do this.
That's fucking wild.
So yeah, and so the funny thing is, so Mickey Mantle, famed womanizer, problem party animal, drinker, alcoholic, like one of those. Eventually got clean in my life and spent every waking minute thereafter apologizing to everyone I knew back then for what a horrible fucking alcoholic I was.
Mm-hmm.
According to Fritz Peterson, Mickey Mantle is a, quote, first-round draft pick of God's. That God wouldn't hesitate just at the drop of a hat. Mickey Mantle, you're on my soul team.
A first-round draft pick of God's?
Who?
Old Donnie Trump.
Yep, first overall.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Here's what I'm going to leave you with.
Okay.
Mike Kekich.
Uh-huh. Wait, okay, so I got a
guy.
little turned around. The guy who wrote the books is the guy who's still
Fritz
happily
Peterson.
married.
Yep, still
and
happily
Mike
married.
Kekich is the one who changed his name and disappeared.
Yep.
Go on.
But Fritz Peterson comes to a part in one of his 2 books where the subject of Mike Kekich's soul comes up and where he thinks his old pal Mike Kekich is going.
Huh.
And the quote from Peterson is that he's, quote, afraid his old friend will be taking a dip or even a swim in the lake of fire.
This piece of shit.
So there's that.
This fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
I hope him and Suzanne are happy together.
I hope you're happy.
I hope you're happy.
I hope you're
fucking
happy.
monsters.
You pinstripe wearing, wife swapping,
Clean shaven.
cretin. You sell out, blackjack dealing, George Steinbrenner jerking off. Just a fucking piece of work, Fritz Peterson. Yeah.
Wow.
Yuck.
Wow.
And that's the most you will ever hear me talk about the New York Yankees.
And you weren't even that mean
No, I
about
wasn't.
it. You
Listen,
were very, you know what?
27 rings, 27 world championships.
Yeah, there's
I'm the
something
first
to it.
person to tip my cap to the Yankees for what they've been able to accomplish, but also, like, go fuck yourselves.
Yeah, fuck the Yankees.
Fuck
so.
you. Fuck your loser fans. Fuck all of you. Fuck the Bronx. Fuck you all. Yeah.
And with that.
And on that note,
we're going to swap over to our regular programming.
a regularly
here.
scheduled programming right
Thank you
now.
so much. Also, oh, by the way, I
Yeah.
have to thank you, too.
For
No
what?
spoilers, because the listeners haven't heard it yet. They're about to hear it. You helped me a lot with this episode.
Oh.
Because I knew that Lauren was going to do true crime.
Yep.
And I knew Carl was going to do the Saint's Curse.
Yep.
And I was determined to do something paranormal and supernatural, and I had no fucking clue what to do with that.
Mhm.
And you helped me a lot, so thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Listen, I'm one of those sports ball people.
Yeah, sports balls.
I am sports balls. So at any point in time, if anybody out there is like, "Hey, sports," I'm like, perhaps I can be of assistance. So
yeah,
it's
listeners,
truly
if
my
you
pleasure.
ever have a sports question, just write it in. Like
Write it
you,
in.
You ask us questions all the time about our stuff, but if you ever have a sportsy thing,
If you ever have a sports question, just send it on in, and I'll find some time.
attention, Joe.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank
Thanks for
you,
listening,
Joey.
everybody.
And enjoy the show, guys. So I'm going to start out today with some haunted hotels that athletes hate to stay in.
Ooh,
starting
this is
with
fun.
the Pfister Hotel,
Ooh.
the most popular hotel for visiting teams in Milwaukee.
Why are you giggling?
Because I wouldn't want to stay there.
Because it's called the Pfister.
Yeah.
It's spelled P-F-I-S-T.
Okay, so not a fist.
Right. But still, it's an interesting name.
Yeah.
The Pfister was built, so it's in Milwaukee, and it's where the visiting MLB teams stay.
Okay.
And the Pfister was built in 1893 by a man named Charles Pfister, who is supposedly the spirit that haunts the halls today. According to many reports, he still visits guests to ensure they are well taken care of. A spooky ghost has been spotted surveying the lobby from like he's on a path. It's like from the lobby, from the grand staircase, strolling through the gallery above the ballroom, and then passing through the 9th floor storage area. So he's like, it's like the same path all the time. People see him. And he's always described the exact same, like older, portly, smiling, and well-dressed. And upon being shown the portrait of Charles Pfister, witnesses swore that that was the same man they saw looking over the hotel. And, you know, he died before 1900.
Yeah.
So a ton of baseball players have stories from staying here, and I found a couple that I would like to share. They hate it.
Oh my gosh.
They hate it.
So do they just refuse to stay there now?
No, they
like
have to. Like that's just like
it's forced.
the hotel that's booked. And they don't understand why. So former Rangers infielder Michael Young stayed there, and he got real scared. He actually told this story to ESPN. And I'm just going to read his quote. He said, "Listen, I'm not someone who spreads ghost stories, so if I'm telling you this, it happened. A couple years ago, I was lying in bed after a night game, and I was out. My room was locked, but I was woken up by footsteps stomping around inside my room.
Okay.
I'd heard all kinds of stories about this hotel, so now I'm wide awake listening to these footsteps in my room, and they would like start and then stop and then start again and stop. And the next time I heard them, I yelled out, 'Hey, hang out. Have a seat, but stop waking me up.' And they stopped. And he like didn't hear it again for the rest of the night.
Hey, good for him. Just yell
which
it
is
out.
great. But he said the experience definitely made him question his stance on like the otherworldly, because before he stayed there, he was pretty staunchly like, I don't believe in that.
Right. But when something like that happens and you have absolutely no explanation, you're like,
It's like, well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Carlos Gomez of the New York Mets is kind of peeved. Like I said, he's mad that they even have them stay there.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't understand. He said that he's heard voices while staying there plenty of times. One time he got out of the shower and he heard static playing in his room, but he couldn't find the source of the sound. And when he finally located it, it was coming from the headphones he had plugged into his iPod. Mm-hmm. And when he grabbed it, it skipped to the middle of like a random song. And it creeped him out so much that he literally went out to the lobby without pants on.
Oh, God.
Like he just had a towel.
He just had to get out of there.
Yeah, waist, because he was like, I can't be in here. And he's quoted as saying, "I'm scared to go there. They should change the hotel. Everybody here doesn't like the hotel. Why do they always put us in the same hotel when we can't sleep? Everything is scary. Everything in the hotel. The paintings and the pictures. It's a lot of old crazy stuff. No good, man. No good."
Oh, my God.
So he hates it. There are even cases where multiple guys witness something simultaneously. Carlos Martinez and Marcel Ozuna from the St. Louis Cardinals were staying there in 2017, and they actually posted an Instagram video of the two of them freaking out. And in the video, Martinez says, "We're here in Milwaukee. I just saw a ghost in Ozuna's room, and he saw another one. We're all in here. We're all in Penita's room." Penita is the pet name for Francisco Pena that plays on the team. He said, "We're all stuck here. We're going to go sleep together. And if the ghost shows up again, we're going to fight it together."
Oh, my God.
So like two of the guys witnessed it, and then they all stayed in the same room because they were scared.
Which is like kind of adorable.
It's adorable because these are like grown men.
Right. We're going to have a sleepover.
We are not
also
separating.
Liked that the Cardinals were thrown in there because Ashley and I we're not like avid baseball fans, but like we have a love for them.
It's going to be the Cardinals.
It's going to be the Cardinals.
I root for y'all when they play against the Cubs.
Sure.
Thank you. Because you really have to pick a side in those games. So thank you for that.
And Illinois is very divided.
Definitely. Especially, I'm from Peoria, which is like smack dab in the middle of Chicago and St. Louis. So even though I'm technically in Illinois, a lot of people root for the Cardinals because St. Louis is right there. So we're like a very divided city. Like our whole high school was like split in half.
Yeah, my whole city was Cardinals.
But you're closer.
Yeah, it was like a 40-minute drive to St. Louis, Missouri. And it's like a 5-hour drive to
so it made
Chicago.
Sense. I get it.
CJ Wilson shared a story about himself and Colby Lewis, who at the time both played for the Texas Rangers, on ESPN. It was a podcast called Dallas's Ben and Ken. I don't know. It was in 2010. 2010. He said that he had experienced cold chills and flickering lights, but Colby claimed to have seen a skeletal apparition around 1:30 a.m. and it freaked him out so much that he actually visited the team chaplain in the middle of the night, because he was
Whoa.
so freaked out, and he missed a radio appearance the next day. So like it shook him
He was
up.
traumatized.
But I mean, if I saw a skeleton in my room, I would probably shit my pants. So.
Yeah, that's true. You wouldn't be
Also,
okay.
With the Rangers, third baseman Adrian Beltre
Yeah.
experienced a really scary night in 2001. He had heard knocking on his door. The television and air conditioning repeatedly turned on and off. He also said he heard pounding noises on the other side of his headboard, and he described them as sounding like a man hitting his open hand against the wood of his headboard.
Were they rhythmic?
Right?
Because
I don't know.
that was just the person in the next room.
Oh,
True.
yeah, somebody
Heavens.
getting down.
I
That's really funny.
don't know. I'll write him a letter. And
Yeah, let's ask. Ew, but
There's-
that's creepy. That's
Other
so cool.
players who have openly discussed having spooky experiences at the hotel include Justin Upton of the Anaheim Angels, Eric Gagne of the LA Dodgers, Brendan Ryan of the Seattle Mariners, Mike Cameron of half the teams in the MLB, Pablo Sandoval of the San Francisco Giants, Edgar Renteria of the St. Louis Cardinals, again, whoop whoop, and Bryce Harper from the Nationals, who once stated, "I laid a pair of jeans and a t-shirt on the table at the foot of the bed. When I woke up in the morning, I swear on everything, the clothes were on the floor and the table was on the opposite side of the room."
To
Whoa.
be fair, Bryce Harper dresses like a douche.
So maybe the
The
ghost
spirit
was
just
like,
took the clothes away. Like, no.
They were probably like studded.
maybe the friction of it caused some sort of electrical.
Like,
Some-
get your douche clothes out of my sight.
So there's another hotel that's super scary that has terrorized NBA players for years.
Ooh.
And this one is in Oklahoma City. It's called the Skirvin Hilton Hotel.
Skirvin Hilton.
Skirvin, yeah.
Skirvin Hilton.
Skirvin
That's what I
Hilton.
wanted to do for some reason.
And it's the hotel of choice for traveling professional basketball players. And they all know about a ghost there that they call Effie.
Effie?
Yeah, supposedly she is a housekeeper who was around during the early years of the Skirvin, which was at the time a luxury downtown hotel. And in 1930, 10 brick floors were expanded to 14 floors. And W.B. Skirvin, the hotel's widowed owner, supposedly had an affair with Effie. And when she became pregnant, he ordered her to stay locked inside a room on the upper floor even after she had the baby. And at some point, as the story goes, Effie went crazy, grabbed the baby, and jumped, killing herself and the child.
Yikes.
But most people are pretty skeptical of this story as there's no historical record to confirm it. And Oklahoma City was a pretty small town back then, so it's not like it would
You'd
go
think
unnoticed.
they'd
Like
heard.
they would
Yeah.
have reported it.
Okay.
So that's probably all a bunch of baloney,
Hogwash.
but they still call her Effie because she fucks with them all the time.
Oh my gosh.
The Oklahoma Thunder jokingly accredits their amazing home record to the fact that the other team is having to stay at the Skirvin and they never get any sleep and they're too tired to play.
They're too exhausted from the spooks.
That's not a problem this year.
Why?
They're not that good.
Good to know.
they're
Maybe
not any
Effie
good.
has turned her
Maybe she's letting him
haunting
sleep.
eye. Knocking on doors, opening drawers, causing commotions in the halls. Supposedly, men are propositioned by a phantom female voice, and some have said that she appeared to them in the shower.
Oh,
Oh,
is
she's trying to
very
get down.
scandalous.
Speaking of,
Some people have seen who they believe to be Effie pushing a stroller down the hallways, and a baby's cry can be heard several nights a month when no babies are checked into the hotel.
yeah.
So that's-
Baby's checking into. I'd like to check in, please.
Can I get a room, please?
I'm gonna need
a crib. Thank you.
a crib. Thanks. I'm gonna need some sleep sounds and one of those projections.
A
that
pull-out
makes stars.
machine,
Yeah,
a
makes
mobile.
stars on the
Yeah.
ceiling.
Hello, room service. I'd like to have a breast.
Breast, please.
Hello,
Oh
room
my
service.
gosh.
I need someone to burp me. Real
Burp cloth.
The NBA haunting phenomenon seems to have started around 2010. At least that's when it started to be like reported publicly. They started talking about it. And that was the year that the Knicks blamed their loss on a restless night at the hotel. Jared Jeffries of the Knicks told the Daily News, "The place is haunted. It's scary." That was his quote. The place is
That's it.
haunted. It's scary. I
I
don't
will
want
say
to talk
no
about
more
it.
on the matter. That is it.
But his teammate, Eddie Curry, said he slept only 2 hours one night because there was constant noise in his room.
Yeah.
He was the only player assigned to the 10th floor, which is supposedly the floor with the most paranormal activity. And he said he spent most of his time in Nate Robinson's room, afraid to be alone. He told news sources later that he definitely believes there are ghosts in that hotel. I just think, I don't know why it is that because like if this was about like, I don't know, a bunch of like female ice skaters, like I would just be like, they were scared, they stayed together. But for whatever reason, I just think of like tall NBA players.
Here's what's even funnier. Eddie Curry is 7 feet tall.
Whoa.
Nate Robinson's 5'6".
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a little guy?
Or 5'9".
And they stayed together?
Whatever, they're like best friends. But
That's so cute.
hilarious.
you guys know who Nate Robinson is. He was the really short guy in the dunk contest that dunked like over Dwight Howard and stuff. You
Even
guys,
though he's 5'9"?
yeah, you'll know him if you see him. He was in Uncle Drew.
I forgot about that movie.
So the 7 foot tall guy had to sneak into the 5'9"
5'9"
guy
Yeah, 5'9".
to
That
stay with him because he
does
was
make the
scared.
story that much better. You were correct.
It's adorable. A few weeks after that, Chicago's Taj Gibson of the Bulls said that his bathroom door slammed in the middle of the night for no reason, and his teammate Derrick Rose was among the Bulls players who had heard strange bangs and bumps in his room throughout the night. Even Bill Simmons, that was the name I was trying to think of earlier that I couldn't think of.
Oh, that's
Bill
the-
Simmons.
Bill
the
Simmons, yeah.
Reporter, yes.
Bill Simmons from ESPN wrote about a fitful night at the Skirvin when he was startled awake by a baby crying somewhere in his room.
Nope.
It
I
was
would
in
run
his
out of the
room.
No, that's not okay.
And that's how I found out that there are haunted hotels that sports players don't like staying in, because when I brought this up to do this episode, I was like, I kind of want to find some paranormal stuff, but it's sports. And Joe was like, I have a story. And I was like, you what?
Let me tell you about
How
Bill
do
Simmons.
you have a story? Yeah.
Ugh,
So
a baby crying in your
in
room.
the
No,
room.
No.
Yeah, I would get on the plane back home
Yeah,
at that
for
point.
sure.
I quit my job.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm out.
Today I announced my retirement from the NBA. It's been a
It's
lovely.
over.
It's been
2
a lovely
years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
But I'm fed up. In 2012, Jordan Hamilton of the Denver Nuggets, which is an adorable team name
I
that I
know.
didn't know existed
Every
until
time I hear it.
2 days ago,
Nuggets.
tweeted, quote, "This hotel creeps me out every time we come here."
I played against him in high school.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Who do you? Oh, so he's from LA.
Yeah, he's from
Yeah.
LA. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
In basketball.
In basketball, yeah.
Were you good?
I was all right.
Yeah.
I wasn't pro level, no.
No.
But I was okay.
Like you could hold your own.
I could hold my own.
All right.
When everybody's in high school, you know.
True.
Yeah.
And
for
then
sure.
all of a sudden, you're not in high school anymore. And it is much different.
It changes.
I've never been able to shoot a basketball. My sister,
me either.
I
Terrible.
don't have a sporty bone in my body.
Me either.
I also don't have a competitive bone in my body. I think that that's a problem too.
Yeah, you have to have the drive for
Mhm.
sure.
Even if I'm playing like bags or what else is it called? We call
Cornhole.
cornhole.
I
thank
call
you.
it bags, and my
We
husband
call it
screams
bags.
at me. He's
Yeah.
like, it's cornhole.
Even that, like I'm horrible at it, and I
Uh-huh.
think it's hilarious that I'm so bad. But
Yep.
everyone's always like, Ashley, if you just, and I'm like, no.
No, don't give me tips.
But
I'm
listen,
fine.
I'm not trying to win. I'm here to drink beer
And throw
this
a
bag.
and hope it
Are
maybe
y'all on
hits
teams, though?
something.
Because he's probably like, but I'm trying to win.
I know,
But
that
I'm
is
gonna
true.
win.
You're usually playing with someone, and they're like, you mother...
Yeah.
If you could
Come
take
on.
one step back, you overshoot it every single time. Shh. In 2013, Wesley Johnson of the Phoenix Suns said that he awoke to find his bathroom door closed and his tub filled with water.
What?
That bothered me.
That is, yeah, that makes me feel
No.
weird.
I don't know why that one got me so
Yeah.
good.
No, literally my body went, like it caved in when you said that. I don't like it. Ooh. Ew.
One
I-
thing, what?
I just can't.
Handle it?
No, that right there. I would be done.
Yeah.
I would like. Continue. I'll talk about what I need out of a hotel. when you're done.
I can't
Clean
wait to hear
sheets,
this.
No ghosts.
Yeah.
Clean sheets and no ghosts, please? Yes.
One thing that makes me a little bit more of a believer about the strangeness going on in this hotel is the fact that the Skirvin is not having it.
Yeah.
Their stance is simply like, we don't discuss the lore, we don't discuss the myths and legends. They dismiss the rumors. The Skirvin has been open since 2007. That's the year that it was reopened as a Hilton. And prior to that, it had been vacant for a little over 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
So I was surprised that I found so many athletes admitting that they had paranormal experiences.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like something that they...
Totally.
No, these guys are still normal dudes, and also a lot of them are young. So like at the time, like Jordan Hamilton, when I'm assuming when he made that, he's probably like 23.
True.
So he's probably like, it was a ghost.
I always forget
It's
about
definitely a
that,
ghost.
that they're so
They're
young.
young,
Like when
yeah.
I'm watching hockey with Joe, and I'm like, wow, how old is he? And Joe's like, he's 18. And I'm like, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how?
It's
what?
like once you hit your 30s, everybody's like, oh, you're old now. Like, you're going to have to retire soon.
Yeah.
Like, these are young men.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But also one thing that I didn't think about, because I mentioned that to Joe. I was like, I'm surprised all these athletes, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, yeah, but think about like how superstitious athletes are too.
Totally.
The different like rituals some of them do. Like there's one hockey player who every time before a game, he dips the tip of his hockey stick in toilet water
Oh, I haven't heard that.
for
And
luck.
that's just his thing.
That's just
Yeah.
like his
Yeah.
superstitious thing.
Yeah, and there's lots of like locker
That's-
room rituals. You have
yeah.
to like hit a certain part of like the locker room when you're leaving. Like athletes do have a lot of
Or like, don't
superstition
wash
going
your
on.
socks for the whole season.
Right.
Or
They're
whatever.
lucky socks.
Playoff beards, everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that kind of ties into sort of like paranormal, supernatural
Right.
stuff
So
a
it's
little
not
bit.
that
or, like,
surprising that
religion.
they would buy
Yeah.
into it.
Baseball
I guess
has the
that's
most
true.
because it's the oldest.
Yes, baseball has a
And-
ton.
Yeah, like so, like if a pitcher's about to throw a no hitter, nobody is supposed to mention it, or else that'll throw it off.
It's sort of like Hamlet. Like you're not supposed to say
Say it
Hamlet.
in a
and if
theater,
you say-
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Like so, if the announcer, if the pitcher's like if it's like 8th inning and he's just like mowing down,
Mm-hmm.
the announcer will be like, "Well, looks like he's gonna be very happy when this game ends."
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
I
You
think
have to
I've
be
noticed
sneaky
that
about
before,
it.
and
Yeah.
I
It's
didn't
like,
even.
whoa, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That was a fun way to say that.
Because if he goes, he's on his way to a no hitter. As soon as he throws the next pitch, home run.
Yeah.
Like-
Oh, can't ruin that.
Or also like I noticed in basketball, and this is just something that I've noticed. It happened in the last game I was watching. I'm watching the game, and Paul George, I'm a Clipper fan, and Paul George is shooting a free throw. He makes the first one, and then a graphic pops up that goes, Paul George is 90% free throw shooter on the season, which is amazing. As soon as he shoots the next one, doink, he misses it, which doesn't super matter, but like it was just like
It was one of
like,
those
it's 'cause you
things.
said it.
yeah, and it was just the
It's your
graphic.
fault.
Like, he couldn't see it,
Yeah.
but it was like
But in your
Because you
head,
guys
you're
put
like,
this
really?
here.
yeah.
It's over.
What do you need out of a hotel?
I need it to be new.
Right.
Or like it
No
needs to be at least
renovations.
30 years or younger.
Okay, so no historical sites.
Nah,
All right.
1990. I need that hotel
All right.
to like have like a fax machine in the back. I what I really do not like is a super old hotel. Like when you go to San Francisco and like some of those hotels are
Buildings
so
are
old.
old,
And it's
yes.
just like, ugh.
Which they're beautiful, but there's definitely going to be a ghost that tries to kill you.
Yeah, last time I was there, I stayed at this like old new one called the Palladium.
Mm-hmm.
And not the Palladium. Why do I keep calling this place the Palladium? It's called the Zeppelin.
So you're thinking of the place in LA
Yeah.
that like has shows
Yeah.
at the Palladium.
It was called the Zeppelin. The
Okay.
Zeppelin Hotel. That's the name of it now. It's clearly like an old ass building.
Mm-hmm.
And my sleep was weird in there. I won't say that there was anything paranormal, but like I sleep with the TV on,
Mm-hmm.
and during the night, like the volume seemed so loud, like so much louder than what it was and it like woke me up and like scared me.
Oh.
And I'm like, what is going on? And I like turned it off, but then I got creeped out because
Yeah,
I need
sure.
to sleep with the
Then
TV
Then
on.
you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
was
just an
going to ask that
unsettled
because you
feeling.
do travel a lot.
Mhm.
And I was going to ask if you had ever, because we have every season we do a paranormal investigation, like at
Ugh.
least one.
Yeah.
And it's been primarily hotels. We did the Biltmore in downtown LA, which was very strange and weird.
Yeah,
And we got a
and
lot of
amazing.
weird audio stuff. We stayed at the Culver Hotel, which
Also
is
very
also
old.
old as shit.
You can still
really
stay there?
old. Yeah.
That makes
And they have done some renovations, but it feels old for
Yeah.
sure.
And then just recently,
Mary.
this December, we stayed at the Queen Mary, and we did an investigation.
And I
there.
did not
That-
sleep a damn wink in the
No.
Queen Mary because I thought
I
a
got-
little ghost
I
child
got
was coming to murder me.
touched
She got
Okay.
touched in our
On
room.
my face twice.
It was because of that I didn't sleep. I left my light on, like no shame. I had a night light.
Yeah.
It was
I put
terrifying.
my headphones in and listened to music as I fell asleep, and I maybe got 45 minutes of sleep.
Absolutely
I could
not. I would have left. I would have drove my ass right back to my house.
Yeah.
A staycation. Y'all got to leave. Y'all got to check out.
Yeah. Also, Tyler, who was our guest, and you remember Tyler Schulke
Tyler
from
Schulke.
Background, he was our guest for that episode, and I am honestly blaming him because he made me sleep in like the separate room alone, and then him and Ashley had a room together, and I'm like,
We
you
slept,
should
me and Tyler
leave.
slept
Yeah.
in a bed together.
And I was
we made
alone in a room
Lawrence
crying
and
You
Lawrence.
should have
basically
went
the
and
whole
piled
night.
your ass in that bed with them.
I know, I really should have. It was a pretty big bed.
It was
We
a
probably
king.
could have done 3. But he like took his sleeping pills and was asleep within seconds. So I'm like, hey, you really should have taken that bed. I'm going to hold
And
that
he
over
slept like he was possessed by a
Yeah,
devil.
so that didn't help your situation.
I just listened to another podcast about the Queen Mary
Yeah.
and how many terrible things have happened on that boat.
Boy,
Yeah.
oh boy.
Lots of death.
But also, I didn't know, and like, this isn't what we're talking about today, but I did want to mention it because it was so cool. Because we took like the tour, the historical tour, but it was also sort of like the paranormal tour. So they tell you the history of it, and then they'll be like, also, we saw a ghost in here once, and just like how it helped in World War II.
Yeah.
What was it? It shortened World War II by a year,
Yeah, because they were able to bring so many people over,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
which was wild.
They
And
were
at one
packing
point,
people on
Hitler
that ship.
had like a hit on the Queen Mary.
Yeah, there
Queen
was
Mary,
a
yeah.
bounty
Yeah.
on the Queen Mary because he's like, this ship is bringing everybody over and it's ruining me.
I will give you $10,000 if you sink that bitch.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
If you take a pistol and shoot that boat
I'll give you the money.
in the back of the neck,
The back of the neck.
while
Put her
he's-
down.
while the boat is peeing.
Take her heart out. Put it in the stove.
Put it in the stove, lightly seasoned. Go.
Speaking
Lightly
of stoves on that boat, somebody died in the boiler room.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
Oh, yes.
Boiled.
Yeah.
Oof. The worst.
What a nightmare.
Yeah, I can't do I can't do that stuff.
And that's fair.
And I'm always
It's
afraid.
creepy.
I'm always afraid everywhere I go, I'm afraid.
I thought you were just going to end your sentence.
I'm always afraid.
And I'm always afraid. Thanks for having me on you guys' pod.
Live a life in fear. Oh.
So I also found some supernatural experiences that people had, which blows my mind.
Please share.
As I said earlier, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Now it's really
So
Aaron
sorry
Rodgers.
that I called him
You called him a murderer
a
earlier.
murderer. Aaron Rodgers actually saw a UFO once. He watched it
What?
for quite some time. And he told this story on Pete Holmes' podcast, You Made It Weird,
I love
back in, I actually
Pete
don't
Holmes.
know when this was. But it happened, the UFO thing happened in February of 2005. It was a super snowy, cold night on the East Coast, and he was staying with his former teammate, Steve Levy, and his family. And Aaron described it as one of those bright nights where it's overcast, but there's enough light from the moon to like see shit.
Uh-huh.
And he said that they were winding down. They were having a really late dinner. It was like 11 o'clock. And they heard a weird siren in the distance. Like they didn't know what kind of siren it was. So they went outside to listen to it to be like, what is that sound?
Yeah.
And, but Aaron Rodgers and the two people he was with they're 100% certain that what they saw when they went outside and watched for like 15 minutes was a UFO.
Because,
So
like, it was nothing they could explain.
yeah. So he described it as a large orange left to right moving object. And because of the overcast night and the snow, you couldn't make it out clearly, but it was behind the clouds, but they could see the light shining from behind the clouds, like right above them. And they were watching it for a while. And he said it was definitely large in the night sky. It was moving from left to right. And at one point, it went out of sight. Like immediately, it was just like out of sight, but they could still hear it.
Oh.
So it was like it put on a cloak. Like it was
Dang.
like all of a sudden it was gone.
But they
could
could
not
hear
see
the
it
sound
anymore,
of it?
but they could still hear whatever sound it was making. And all three of the guys were like, "What the fuck was that? What just happened?" And right after that, as they were like listening to it move, but they couldn't see it, he said that they heard about 4 fighter jets come flying over, and then they saw these 4 jets come flying over. And this was funny. Pete Holmes was like, "How'd you know it was a fighter jet?" And Aaron Rodgers was like, "You know what a fighter jet sounds and looks
they're
like.
very
Like,
loud.
it was a fighter jet."
Yeah.
So what makes the story even crazier is that even though this happened like 11 years before the interview on You Made It Weird took place, he remembered it so clearly. He said he didn't like just brush it off at the time. He looked into it after that because he
Good
was
for
like, I
him.
saw a UFO.
I'm
I know I saw a
investigating.
UFO. And as he was doing his research, he found that a lot of UFO sightings include the presence of fighter jets and take place near nuclear power plants, which we've talked about on the show. Well, the alarm that they heard that brought them outside from dinner was from about 30 or so miles out, and it was a nuclear power plant that had an alarm that went off.
Oh.
So
Like
he
around, like at the same time.
at the same time, yeah, that's
Okay.
that's what brought them outside is they heard this alarm going off, and it was a nuclear power plant having some sort of
There's some shady shit going on, guys. The government's hiding things.
yeah. I also wanted to go internationally for a minute to Florence on October 27th, 1954. And this story takes place at a football match, soccer.
Yes.
And
Got it,
let's
got
get
it.
it right.
Soccer.
It's soccer.
It's definitely
For all
not
you
football.
listeners who hear football and think of American football. This was in Tuscany, and it was in a packed full like concrete bowl stadium called Stadio Artemi Franchi. 10,000 people. I know. I speak French.
It was so beautiful.
Wait, no.
It's in Italy,
I
right?
speak-
Didn't you say you said Florence?
I speak French.
I speak
I
French.
speak French, but that wasn't French.
Yeah. 10,000 people were watching this game, and just after halftime, the stadium fell completely silent, and then a roar came up from the crowd, described as half amazement and half utter fear. The crowd was not looking at the game anymore. They were staring up at the sky and pointing. The players even stopped playing to stare up at the sky. One of the footballers, soccer players, Ardico Magnini, who played for Italy in the 1954 World Cup, said that he remembered everything A to Z. He said it was something that looked like an egg that was moving slowly overhead over the concrete bowl. And everyone was looking up, and also there was some sort of glitter coming down from the sky, like silver glitter. He said, we were astonished. We had never seen anything like it before. We were absolutely shocked. Even the referee's report of the game states that play was suspended because spectators were watching something in the sky.
Wow.
One of the spectators in the crowd said that there were actually multiple egg-like crafts, and he remembers it very clearly. They were moving very, very fast, and they just stopped, like directly over the stadium.
Whoa.
And then started slowly moving, and it all lasted. It was a couple minutes long, so it wasn't just something that like
It wasn't a
and
quick
like they
thing,
were like,
yeah.
what was that? Like they watched it. And he said he would like to describe them as being like Cuban cigars but silver. So they were
Okay.
egg, but they were a little
Okay.
stretchier. Some people shrug off the event. They tried to shrug off the event as mass hysteria, but there were actually numerous UFO sightings in many towns across Tuscany that day and over the days that followed. So it wasn't just the people in that stadium
Yeah.
having a moment. Some even reported a ray of white light seen in the sky coming from the north of Florence.
Wow.
So that was also strange. A journalist at the time of the event said that he received hundreds of calls on that day, so much so that he was like, I got to see this. So he ran up to the top of the newspaper's building because there was a cathedral next door and he couldn't see around it. So he ran up on top of the building, and as soon as he got up there, he watched them too
Whoa.
and was like watching them throughout the sky, and
So
they
he
started
got to
coming
witness
towards the
it.
cathedral,
Eee.
which is wild.
That is
Damn.
so.
This event was actually a favorite of Roberto Pinotti, who is the president of Italy's National UFO Center. And also, just PS, if you guys don't know, several other countries have legitimate research centers for UFOs because almost everyone believes in them aside from the USA. Like almost all.
It's
Which
just
means
a normal thing.
we're the ones who really have them.
Yeah, probably.
Of course.
Which we're the ones that either have
That would
them
be
or
true.
it's us.
Yeah.
Also, we're incredibly arrogant here.
100%.
I feel like
yes.
a lot of other developed countries are like, we couldn't be alone in the universe, and Americans are like,
Yes.
but
it's just us.
even if we aren't
100.
alone, we're the best.
Yeah, we're number one, so we don't need to care about anything else.
Yeah. Anyway, so one of his favorite things involving this event was the silver glitter falling from the sky, because this is something apparently that is common with like big UFO sightings with this, which I didn't know about.
Me either.
He said it's a fact that at the same time UFOs were seen over Florence, there was a strange sticky substance falling from above. And when the light shone on it, it did look like glitter, but it was like almost like stringy cotton.
Okay.
He calls it angel hair. That's what he
No,
calls it in his
I don't
research.
like it.
He said that he had only witnessed this once himself when he was 10 years old. And he said he remembered in broad daylight seeing the roofs of the houses covered in this white substance for about an hour, and then like snow, it evaporated. He said that no one knows what this strange substance is or its connection to UFOs, only that it usually happens in tandem with UFO sightings.
Bizarre.
Others have described the substance as thin cotton wool or cobwebs, but it was almost impossible to collect because it disintegrated on contact just like snow. But doesn't this remind you of the story about when Joe and I went to Southern Illinois and all those cobwebs were falling from the sky?
Yeah.
And it was like super creepy. The
that's
whole time we were
true.
there for 3 days, you would be driving and you could see like cobwebs falling in the lights of the car. It was like the
Whoa.
mist.
So what if you were having this experience?
What if it was UFO? Actually,
God.
it was because when spiders migrate, they basically like
They
build
just
these
dropping
webs.
their web off.
Yeah, they build these big webs and then like let the wind take the webs, and so it falls down in like strands.
So they're
'Cause
webs
that's how
practical.
they're like Spider-Manning.
Basically,
around.
exactly.
Yes.
Shooting it all out.
So a couple people were actually at this during this Tuscany thing. They were able to gather a few samples of the stuff by rolling them up on matchsticks, and they took them to the Institute of Chemical Analysis at the University of Florence. And the lab subjected the materials to spectrographic analysis and concluded that it contained the elements boron, silicon, calcium, and magnesium, and that it was not radioactive. Unfortunately, testing the substance also destroyed it because it's very
Yeah.
fickle.
Yeah.
Skeptics blame this event on the migration of spiders. Like I said, they think the objects that were seen in the sky that day were spiders migrating, as they do every year, and the substance falling from the sky was just the shedding of their webs. But those who are still alive, who were at the game or near the stadium that day, like persistently disagree. They're like, look, we see spider migrations. Like,
Right.
we know
This
what they
was
look
not
like.
that.
These were metal crafts. Like, they weren't spiders. Pinotti, he thinks it's all bullshit, especially because they got a chemical analysis of the angel hair and it was not spider silk.
Yeah.
Like, spider silk is a protein. It's organic. It doesn't contain boron, silicone, or magnesium.
Yeah,
and he's
so
backed
it's
up.
debunked right there.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
it's backed up by science writer Philip Ball, who says that boron and silicone are very rarely naturally found in living bodies, and that's highly unlikely that this substance belonged to any spiders.
Well.
Wowee.
Aliens.
Disgusting.
Aliens for sure.
My favorite thing about this crazy thing that happened is how almost every interview with the people, player or spectator, they all say that witnessing it made them very happy, and they felt lucky to have been able to do so. So
Oh.
it wasn't like
It was a positive
scarring.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Other athletes, very quickly, who have had close encounters include soccer legend Maradona. He briefly mentioned in an interview last year that there was a time that he had been out drinking. He had had a few too many, and he was missing. He ended up being missing for 3 days.
Whoa.
And he said, quote, "Why make things up? They took me, and I can't tell you about it." Like, he claims that he was abducted by aliens.
What?
Although most people think that he just went on a 3-day bender
He could have.
and either came up with the weirdest excuse ever or was on so many drugs he actually believed he was abducted
Yeah.
by aliens. Who knows? But one of my favorites, a huge believer in UFOs, was boxing champion Muhammad Ali.
Ah.
Huge.
Obsessed
loves-
with that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Later on in his life, he talked a lot about the many sightings he's had. He even told Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. So he was very vocal.
About his sightings.
Yeah. The first sighting that we know of occurred in 1970. Ali described seeing a brightly illuminated object in the sky with one of his trainers. So there was a witness for this one. There was witness for a lot of the sightings that he had.
Yeah.
He said, I happened to look up just before dawn, as I often do while running, and hovering above us was this brilliant light hanging as if by an invisible thread. I imagine this scenario is basically like Rocky meets Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Exactly.
At first, I thought it was a beacon projected from a helicopter, but the moments later, a similar object passed in front of us. The second UFO had a glowing red tail behind it. I brought it to the attention of my trainer, who was standing nearby. We watched them come from behind the skyline and move slowly across the sky for at least 15 minutes. The best I can describe the sighting is to say that they were just round and big. Ali also said that he later found out that there were other UFO sightings that made that same night, including a report from a pilot landing at Newark Airport. A number of reports were sent to LaGuardia Airport as well as a caution, just being like, just so you know, like, there's crafts and we don't know who's flying them.
We don't know what they're about.
Then years later, he saw another UFO. He said that it was the closest sighting that ever happened to him. And it was basically they were driving. He was a passenger in this car one night driving north on the New Jersey Turnpike. And he said, what a sight it was. We could see the shadow made by the UFO as it passed over the pavement of the road in the light of the full moon. So not only did they see the craft, but they saw the shadow on the ground that it made.
Okay, so it was definitely crossing over. Yeah.
Because so many people are like, you saw a satellite. It's like, well, I mean.
No, well, we didn't in this situation.
So, Muhammad Ali had several other encounters of the fourth or fifth kind. I don't remember which UFOs are. Throughout his life, 16 that he spoke about publicly. 16 UFOs sightings.
That's insane. Why does he see so many?
I don't know. Well, he completely believed in what he saw. It helps that he had witnesses almost every single time.
Right.
But he totally believed in it based on the way that the subject has been interpreted by his religious teachers in the Nation of Islam, which apparently has always looked at UFOs within the context of religion. And that's something that we actually are going to talk about later this year when we do our religion episode, incorporating like the paranormal and the supernatural into religion. Mm-hmm. And he was, I guess they teach UFOs in the Nation of Islam and like how that relates to.
Yeah. It's all that's a different conversation.
Which it will be on another episode.
And then the only other thing was Jose Canseco, who claims that he has spoken to aliens and that they're trying to teach us time travel, and also that he wanted to run for president, but that the aliens told him he was better suited to fight the, quote, aliens in government as a private citizen and celebrity.
Oh, my. Well, that was a special one.
I believe that one for
sure. Definitely. Oh, what a special thing.
The craziest story for me was the whole sports arena, like the soccer arena.
Oh, yeah. No,
stopping the game to watch the crafts. It kind of reminded me of that scene, remember, in Men in Black, where it was like the baseball game.
Yeah.
And they have to stop play, and like, doesn't the baseball like hit the guy in the head? Yeah.
So even the players in the soccer game stopped,
Everyone
right? Like
stopped.
everything stopped.
Mm-hmm.
That shows that it was so much like beyond us that everybody had to stop.
It wasn't a plane.
Yeah. It was not just a normal thing that was outside the realm of any logical explanation.
Yeah.
It was not a spider.
So see, guys, sports are
creepy.
Than we could have anticipated.
I know, it is really true.
Those hotel ones are the ones that are the creepiest to me.
Too much.
I don't like ghosts. If I saw a UFO, I'd be like, just don't bother me.
Yeah.
But ghosts.
Just leave me alone, please.
Ghosts, I can't do it.
Have you ever had an experience aside from?
I have one.
Tell me.
That I think. And I have more, but I have one that I can think of right now because I think I
Right.
put the other ones in. But we were staying at a cabin in Big Bear, and I was kind of half sleeping on the bed. Didn't have a TV to watch when I was.
Oh, no. That's why.
Yeah, so I was
This is
like,
why.
I don't know if I was fully asleep, but I was asleep. And I dozed off, and I felt the bed like as if somebody sat on it next to me. And I just like didn't think about it. I was like, I'm just going to keep my damn eyes closed. I don't want to see nothing I don't want to see.
Just ignore it.
Yeah. And the next morning I was like, were any of y'all sitting on, did y'all sit on the bed next to me? Were y'all playing a trick on me? And everybody was like, no.
Yeah, why would
and
we
I
do
believe
that?
all those people.
Yeah.
And I was like, something sat on my bed last night. The bed like pressed.
It moved.
It suppressed. Not like it.
I know
like,
what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
that
was
is
scary.
creepy.
That
AF.
was scary.
Were you not at, for some reason I thought you were there, but maybe you had left already because this was late in the night. Another name drop of Stephen Causey. He had like a big party at his apartment after Glee one night. It might have even been his birthday. And Tyler Schulke saw like a girl in Stephen's shower that wasn't really there. Were you not there for that night?
No, I was not.
That was the
No, I
most
was
dramatic evening. Yeah. I just think you would have like gone sprinting out of the
Oh, yeah, I would have
apartment
been like,
if
all
you
right,
had
y'all.
been there. Yeah.
Happy birthday, Steven. I'm out of here.
Tyler was like bawling his eyes out. Like it got so bad. And
Oh
Steven
my
had to like talk him
gosh.
down and be like, there's no one in my shower. It was a whole event.
Where was she? What was she doing in the shower? Was she taking a shower?
No,
Maybe
just
it was
like
the
standing
same,
there.
ghost
Oh, it was
from the
Effie.
hotel.
Effie was coming back to get
Was he in the
busy.
bathroom like with the door closed?
I think he was peeing and like felt movement by the shower curtain and looked and saw a girl and then like came screaming out.
Oh, I would have had. I wouldn't have been able to get the door open. I would have. I would have ran through the door. It would have been like one of
Like a
those
cartoon.
The
imprints.
shape, Carl-shaped door print.
It'd be like
Oh my
Looney
God.
Tunes.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Maybe he was trying to play a trick on somebody, like when they go look and he closed the door on them.
It was all
Locks
a
them
prank.
in.
Totally.
Oh, I would have gone nuts.
Yeah.
Insane.
Well, thank you so much, Carl, for coming on to our
Thank you
Seriously.
for having me. This
It was a
so
pleasure.
much fun.
It was so nice to see you again. We haven't seen each other
I know.
in so long. And now you're basically my neighbor, so we have
gotta
no
go to Idle
excuse.
Hour. No excuse for you to just be up in this house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carl,
Mom, you got a
get her
kid
out of the
now.
house.
We have to. The
I
night
know.
is still young, and by
I
the
know.
night I mean our ages. Please don't let us decrepit.
Don't let us rot.
Don't let us rot.
I live
just-
far away,
listen.
but I do enjoy coming to North Hollywood and going to Idle Hour. So I'll get a babysitter.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We also have a barcade now, so let's go do that.
Ooh, hell yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to plug? Do you have anything coming up?
You can always catch me at the UCB Theater
Yeah.
on Sunday nights at 9:30 p.m. with Shitty Jobs. Every second Friday of the month at UCB with white women. I'm at ASCAT Saturdays and Sundays. What else? Listen to the Flagrant Ones Patreon if you like basketball. The two people who do like sports.
Yeah, there's going to
That's
be
for
very
Joe.
few.
That's hosted by me and Sean Clemens and Hayes Davenport of Hollywood Handbook, if anybody knows that podcast. Those guys are great. I'm also on a bunch of other podcasts, and follow me on Instagram. I deleted my Twitter. At Damn It Carl.
Oh, yeah.
We'll
That is
tag
your
you in
name.
some
Yeah,
Yes,
tag
you'll also be tagged. But
Yeah.
you the best, Carl.
Yeah,
Thank
you're the
you for
best.
having
Thank you
me.
so
Thanks for coming.
much. And thank you guys so much for listening to our season 4 premiere.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. We have so many cool episodes and great guests to bring you this season. We're very excited to be back. Please follow us on social media at Keep It Weirdcast across all platforms. Subscribe to our show on iTunes or Spotify. Check out our Patreon at www.patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast to donate to our show and get bonus episodes and newsletters and discounts on merchandise. And check out our Etsy store at www.etsy.com/shop/keepitweirdpodcast to grab a hoodie or a t-shirt or a tote bag or a sticker or a pin, whatever your heart desires. Oh, also, look, in the next month or so, we are getting new merch. We're getting new t-shirts.
Oh,
New
yeah.
designs. It's going to be
Just
very
reminded
exciting.
me saying that. I'm so
Mhm.
excited.
Me too. One last thing, Carl,
Yes.
what is our sign off today?
Sign off today is for the lovers and friends, where it ends and begins. I hope you are all well and that there are no ghosts in your hotel.
Well, that's the new best sign off we've ever had.
You're so talented. Thank you
Was-
so much.
I see the improv has just like really worked for you, you know? Like, it's lovely.
And keep
And
it weird.
keep it weird.
Thank you. Do you guys smell pizza?
I don't, but now I'm hungry.
Am I
You
having a
having a
stroke? Do you guys smell burnt feathers?
Oh, God. Call the hospital.